Now then, I'd like to invite the first speaker of the proposition to the podium, please.
May I begin? Honorable adjudicators, ladies and gentlemen, an aid invasion is a last resort. An aid invasion is not something you do casually. An aid invasion is not something you do without good reason. And that's because you only support an aid invasion when you know that there are millions of lives involved, when you know that the very future of several countries depends on whether you choose to take these measures and support an aid invasion. That's what's going to achieve stability and peace in our world. We know that sometimes drastic measures have to come in order to accommodate drastic times. In these countries, they are experiencing drastic times. Because in these countries, there's a world different from the world we know. There's no stability. There are no respect for human rights of the people. And these countries need an aid invasion. Now, the word invasion at first seems a bit intimidating, but that's why we'd like to define the motion. The government defines this House as a liberal democracy, an aid invasion as crossing borders for the purposes of giving humanitarian aid when foreign aid in a failed state where mass violations of human rights occur has not gotten through. We would like to support this motion through 2 points. Our first reason is the humanitarian issue, how people are dying and how people will continue to die if we do not continue our plans for an aid invasion. Our second point will be how an aid invasion is important to ensure a government's stability. The first example is Burma. In fact, we know that a cyclone recently hit Burma. 15,000 to almost 100,000 people are expected to have been dead in this cyclone alone. And you add 100,000 who are found without homes and shelter and food. And that's not the only problem that is plaguing Burma. Civilians are being killed by the dangerous infrastructure of the government. To give you an example, civilians are being killed by the landmines that the country itself has planted in lands. And that's because the country is so unstable that it's being torn apart by warfare. They can't even ensure peace in their own country, and that's why they need this aid. To further elaborate on the dire situation of these countries, 10,000 Somalians have died, with over twice that number being wounded. Somalia and Burma are both on the list for failed states. They are both countries that violate human rights in a mass number, and they are both countries that cannot support their own people because they have no stable government. That for whatever reason, these things are happening. And if they are happening, then we need to do whatever is within our power to stop it, because that's our basis as a moral, liberal democracy. We cannot let mass numbers be exploited when in some other places people enjoy a living wage and living conditions. These people are worried about whether they're going to survive the next day. The third portion of the humanitarian issue is that mass numbers are being forced to flee their homes. For example, in Burma, 200,000 people were driven from their homes, and 120,000 were left as refugees within their own country. That's because of mass warfare and the mass destruction. Yes, ma'am.
Then why don't you just give direct aid instead of just going an invasion and infringing upon these nations' sovereignty?
That's because direct aid is not going to work. We're talking about states in which the government is so unstable and so corrupt that even if we do give these countries aid, that they will not go to the people. They will not go to the people who actually need it. They're going to be exploited by the corrupted officials of the government, and therefore the aid that foreign aid, we have tried that before, but it's not going to go to the people who need it. Second, there is no beginning for these countries if we do not support an aid invasion. Because if you consider the situation now, it's a vicious cycle. Because the government cannot support its people, they don't have enough capital. Because the countries that don't have capital, these countries cannot develop. Because the countries cannot develop, they're stuck in poverty, exploitation, hunger, and human rights violation. And finally, that is the only way we're going to ensure the future of the countries around them, because we live in a global society where one issue affects every other country. That will be further elaborated by the Deputy Prime Minister. We will see that an aid invasion does benefits for everyone and everyone in the world. Thank you.
Now I'd like to invite the first speaker of the opposition to the podium, please.
Now we are here to debate about the motion that this House supports an aid invasion. Before I go on to anything else, let me just give you a quote from UN Charter. It said that nothing contained in the present UN Charter shall authorize the UN to intervene in matters which are essentially within the domestic jurisdiction of any state. What this says is that sovereignty of a state should be preserved, even in situations where there are deaths, there are lives dying. And the government will not disregard the death of the people dying in these failed states. We will give them direct aid or mutual improvement if they agree for our invasion as well. What they're doing here, ladies and gentlemen, is, on the contrary, is that they will invade that country without consent. They will ignore the sovereignty. They will step on sovereignty, and they will do what they think is the best for the country, and will not let the country think for themselves, ladies and gentlemen. We can see the example of Afghanistan and how U.S. tried to improve the humanitarian issue state in Afghanistan. But what it did, ladies and gentlemen, if you have seen the news, is that the election is still way corrupt in Afghanistan. Election is not an election there. It is just turning your paper in just to have one person become the leader of your state. They should have mutual agreement when they are willing to help those and give aid to those failed states. And through mutual agreement, we can have more peaceful and more cooperative way with the sovereignty respected and all of the benefits that they have proposed protected, ladies and gentlemen. But what they say is that disregard them, disregard their sovereignty, and go on with what the developed countries believe in is right. And as for stability, they said that stability will always be reached if there is an aid invasion. But do you not realize that in the case of Iraq or Afghanistan, the terrorism has risen by 5% after U.S. invasion, ladies and gentlemen? So we say that the developed countries' intrusion cannot be justified by the word stability, ladies and gentlemen. Also, we question who will actually help these countries. In the words of Machiavelli and Adam Smith, a person is not a philanthropist, ladies and gentlemen. They work for their interest. How about these countries that are willing to help, that might be willing to help those failed states with aid? They do it because they have a purpose. Now, their burden of proof is that after the act of prevention and the reaction and the rebuilding, they have to prove us that this stability will be reached, that stability and the ultimate peace of failed state will be reached after the aid invasion. If they cannot prove that, then their case completely falls. And our team stance is that aid invasion only worsens the situation, not ameliorating the situation, ladies and gentlemen. We say that the aid from developed countries is just a fake name for exploitation and justification for the invasion, ladies and gentlemen. It resembles Japanese colonialism in Korea. It is no different in that they pursue a purpose to gain oil or whatever that is that may exist in the failed state. And also, we see that what U.S. promised was an improvement in democracy, but what it did was nothing close to that. It only eradicated the democracy, the small hint of democracy that might have existed in Iraq. And now, to our second point about nonviolence. How aggression leads to a big retribution, as I've told you. It leads to 5 times more terrorism attack in Iraq. For example, in Sudan, there was a civil war between Islam and Arab. But if a country is to intervene in this civil war matter, it is taking side on civil war, where it should be decided by the ethnicities involved in a single country. It is their matter. It is not a matter that should be decided from others, ladies and gentlemen. And yes, because of this, we believe that direct aid or mutual agreement would be a better reason than aid invasion. For these reasons, please oppose. Thank you.
Now I'd like to call upon the second speaker of the proposition to the podium.
Ladies and gentlemen, the issue we are facing right now, right here, all over the world, is the question of whether we should let millions of people die or whether we should stop killing those and aiding those people from death. Now, to begin with, the opposition has brought up the incidents where these people must be respected their sovereignty. This is absolutely true. We must respect their sovereignty. However, question is, if you're in a failed state, do you have sovereignty? If you're in tyranny, if you live with a tyrant, do you have any sovereignty over the choices you make? No. These people don't have sovereignty. What our job is to give that sovereignty to them. We are not taking sovereignty away. We're offering their choice to take it. The sovereignty has been destroyed by tyrants, has been taken away by corrupt bureaucrats. We are trying to retrieve that sovereignty back to the people. This is what an aid invasion is. Now, to begin with, they have also brought the incident of the Sudan war. That is a civil war. That since it is their war, we should not care if millions of people die. We should not care if 400,000 deaths occurred in Sudan. We should not care if 45,000 deaths a month occur in Congo. That should be none of our business. Do you agree with this? We don't. I'm pretty sure that all of you agree that aid invasion isn't probably going to be perfect. It's not going to solve every problem. However, it will save lives. It has. It has done in Kosovo, it has done in Sudan, and will continue to work. It's not the best solution, it's the best we have. Like I said, in Sudan, because of the war, 2 million people were displaced. 2 million people were forced to leave their homes in fear of death. Are you just going to sit there and not do anything? We, as people, before anything else, have the duty to aid. We, as humans, ought to protect these people's rights. And yes, sir.
Aid intrusion is no different to war. Why do you believe that aid intrusion will cause less casualties than the casualties that is happening in the status quo?
Here's a little story. An officer went to visit a town with his men. 3 men in that town came and killed one of his soldiers. The next morning, that officer took 3 civilians, put them against the wall, and said, "I will kill these 3 men for your punishment." Okay, if that's the case, if you went to that officer and said, "Why are you killing these 3 men?" They might be even innocent. And if he gives that gun to you and says, "Fine, if you shoot one of these men, I will let the last 2 go," will you? Some of you may say, "No, I wouldn't shoot them." But if we change that number from 3 to 400,000, would you? I understand that there will be casualties. I understand that there will be blood. I also understand that many lives will be spared. Many innocent civilians will be spared. Many people will continue to live. Many people won't have to fear at night because some might come and kill them for no reason at all. Remember, our children, these people suffering in these countries will remember what we do. These people will remember that we, when they needed the most desperate help, in the most darkest of times, when they were starving, when they were being killed, when they were being tortured, that we sat here and did nothing. That we, despite all our principles of life and liberty, didn't have the guts to fight for it. They will remember that. And it will be recorded down the pages of history of our inaction to act. And I ask of you, let's not make history shameful. Thank you.
Now I'd like to call upon the second speaker of the opposition to the podium.
Ladies and gentlemen, it seems like they're trying to make us cry. Cry for those people who are living in the poor state, in the failed stage. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we want to cry. However, ladies and gentlemen, we believe that this aid invasion, since cannot be the solution, but even worse, this will actually worsen the problem. And that because we are so fully aware of that state, and that's what I'm going to prove, we, the opposition team, stand firmly here, believing that aid invasion should never be supported, aid invasion should never be done. Well, ladies and gentlemen, our response is this. Don't you see the example of Iraq? Even though America actually invaded Iraq their region of the building of the democratic country, democratic government. However, what's the state now? Ladies and gentlemen, taking a look at the status quo in Iraq, actually terrorists are more attacking the civilians, and there's a 5 times higher terrorist attacks in the past. Well, then you can see that actually aid invasion has done much better, done much worse, has made the country in a much more worse state, ladies and gentlemen. And also, ladies and gentlemen, they have come up here and repeated about the why we need this invasion. Yes, exactly. Why we want to ask why we need this aid invasion. There are so many side effects, ladies and gentlemen. Take a look at the example of Iraq, Afghanistan, Kosovo. Actually, there are a lot of side effects. Let's take an example of Kosovo, especially. Kosovo, there is an aid invasion, and UN troops actually went in there, and there have been a lot of side effects reported. Those peacekeepers, those soldiers actually raping those women, and prostitutes actually rose up really high. So I'll take it in a moment. So ladies and gentlemen, this actually clearly shows that aid invasion actually does not solve anything, but will worsen the problem. Don't you think so, madam?
Sir, we agree that there are consequences for everything. Don't you believe that us, as a moral liberal democracy, should pursue the policy that has the least consequences and spares the most lives?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, didn't I say it actually kills more people? As I have given you the example of Iraq, the terrorists are now attacking more civilians, and a lot of civilians are being killed. This actually kills more people, and actually aid invasion is nothing better, nothing good, but only worsening the problem. We believe we never can aid invade like this. So actually, this aid invasion can cause a lot of political alertness and conflicts. Aid invasion to help actually will lead to political conflicts, deterioration of political relationships. Take a look at the example of the Iran and Iraq. Well, actually, when the Iraq war was deployed, America took an action. Do you know what Iranian's leader said? He said that he said to America to get out of the Middle East, or we'll actually fight against America. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, sir. This actually brings the political alertness, political conflicts more serious into the serious state, ladies and gentlemen. So, ladies and gentlemen, don't be just deceived by what they say. They're trying to make you cry, but let's face the reality of this aid invasion. Thank you.
Now I'd like to invite the third speaker of the proposition to the podium.
The central question of this debate is, what will the world community do when faced with two choices? In the face of massive human rights violations, genocide, massacres, and mass starvation, when tyrants will not accept aid to even feed their own people? Will the world, as the opposition says, sit by and do nothing with misguided ideals of sovereignty, or will the world take responsible and necessary action as a moral, liberal democracy? When one man is enslaved, all of humanity is not free. Will we mount an aid invasion? And the government says yes. And we fully realize the magnitude of our suggestion. It's extreme, but as much as it is extreme, it is also necessary. Because we have a duty to humanity as humans. No, sir. A duty to humanity as people to provide humanitarian aid, to create stability in regions that which do not have it, and finally, protect the surrounding nations from spreading this instability. The opposition claims that an ideology and a doctrine of sitting by and watching and doing nothing is a better thing. They say that it is an issue of sovereignty that comes into account, that we must respect the sovereignty of tyrants, dictators, and mobs. Now I ask you, where does sovereignty come from? Sovereignty comes from the consent of the governed. People like you and me, are the foundation of sovereignty, not a dictator's claim that he has a right to tyrannize his people as he wants. So from people who are oppressed, massacred, enslaved, and tyrannized, no government can claim the right to sovereignty in that case. And in those cases, the government asks that we mount an aid invasion. Their so-called ideals of sovereignty. Let me ask you.
Point of information.
Yes, sir.
If you are so concerned with the rights of those in those failed states, then why do you not think of the consequences of the impulsive actions that the proposition is willing to take?
As I said, I fully understand the magnitude of this policy, but to our invasion, we only use in extreme cases the utmost responsibility. Just as we have succeeded in Kosovo, we have succeeded partly and we're going to succeed in Afghanistan, just as countries like Burma and other countries who face massive violations require this, because we, as the international community, can do at least a better job than tyrants can. I ask you, the issue of sovereignty is irrelevant in cases where failed states run by tyrants stop aid from going to people who need it, where massive and endemic corruption results in mass starvation, ethnic cleansing, murder, systematic murders condoned by the government are happening. And in these cases, will we sit by, as the opposition so gladly would, to stand by, and when in our hands we have the power to fix this once and for all? We realize that aid invasion is not something we can just stroll around. It's a serious thing involving deaths, sacrifices, but ultimately better results. They cite certain cases such as Kosovo, where rape and prostitution has risen by a certain amount after the UN and the NATO coalition came in and stopped ethnic cleansing. Let's choose between two evils. Would you have some rape and prostitution, but a potential to fix that with a stable government with no ethnic cleansing, or should we have let by and let innocent Serbs and Kosovians be massacred by Albanians? But as a final note, I ask you, we have the power to change the world. We have the power to stop ethnic cleansing, murders, and other atrocities from happening around the world. And will we do nothing? Or will we take action when we can? Thank you very much.
Now I'd like to call upon the third speaker of the opposition to the podium.
Change, yes, but not the change for the worse. That is the opposition team's stance today. And going further, our team's stance is that aid invasion will only worsen the situation. Yes, we want to help those people. Now it seems like the government team is believing that we are those cruel people who do not want to help these poor people. Yes, we want to help those people, but we say, as our first and second speaker has clearly mentioned, not through this aid invasion, which can worsen the situation in those countries. And second rebuttal. Now it seems like the government side has made a contradiction by saying that one of their arguments was that this aid invasion can enable the government's stability. However, their second and third speaker has come up here and said that sovereignty does not stand because there's no government. If there was no government, how could their argument be based upon the government's stability? So we say that the government side has made a clear contradiction today. And going to third class, no, thank you, sir. Going on to third rebuttal. Now, this is a point that the government side has failed to rebut, which was our first argument. Isn't this aid invasion a justification for their invasion? If you look at the example of USA going onto the Iraq under the name of getting rid of their tyranny and making their environments better, we say no. We say that the purpose the USA went to Iraq was to get the Iraqi oil, which in fact, after their invasion, they took 40%. They took 40% of Iraqi oil. So we say that such aid invasion is only a justification for their invasion. And to the fourth rebuttal, no, thank you, sir. Going to fourth rebuttal, they never has mentioned or explained about the practicality of these aid invasion, which we have questioned. We say that in the status quo, this will not be implemented well, since there are no philanthropic countries which are willing to pay tons and tons of money to help these countries. Because why? They are individual countries who also seek for their individual nations' benefit as well. And going on to, no, thank you, madam. Going on to the third rebuttal. Now, the third speaker has said, and with the military way, they can change people's religious beliefs and people's ideological beliefs with the means of military. We say no. Just by killing people, just by torturing and harming those people physically, we say that their religious beliefs, which are in the Sudan, will not change. So we say that this aid invasion is not effective at all. Now, it seems like they are saying that they are responsible and we are not responsible because we are not taking pity on these poor people. However, we say that we want to help these people. We want to help those poor people, but not through this aid invasion, which is so ineffective, but also can worsen the situation. Now, let's look at what will happen after this aid invasion, which the government team praises so hard. There will be what there will be left is more political conflict, as the example of Afghan and Iraq, and more domestic conflict, which will lead to more casualties in that country, and more young girls and women being raped when there are other international soldiers going in and making a war, and more nations divided into two parts. So, ladies and gentlemen, who do you say is more responsible? We actually care for these people while facing the reality, while these people are so irresponsible by just throwing in the soldiers, believing that it will work anyway. However, ladies and gentlemen, we say no. We, the opposition team, cares more about the consequence after this aid invasion. Yes, their intention was good. However, ladies and gentlemen, after looking at all those consequences in the past, after the aid invasion, we say that this will lead to more harms than the status quo. So, ladies and gentlemen, please oppose. Thank you.
Now, the opposition reply speaker, please come to the podium for your speech.
Ladies and gentlemen, at first, they tried to make us cry. Now, I want to cry for them. So, ladies and gentlemen, now let me tell you why I want to cry for them, by telling you what we have proved and what they failed to prove. So, ladies and gentlemen, this debate boils down to one simple question. So, which is more responsible, on impulsive intrusions without the proper estimatable harms, or a long-sighted reaction which thinks of the consequences beforehand? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure that you know the answer. Of course, the long-sighted reaction. And what we stand for is this long-sighted reaction, and what they stand for is this impulsive intrusions without the proper estimates of harms. So throughout this debate, we have recognized two words. One word where government team is leaving, another word where opposition team is leaving on. Take a look at the government team's word. They just impulsively intrude other country, just ignoring the sovereignty, and just go in, even though they try, their intention is good, but their government just does not think beforehand. They just go in, make up the problem much more worsening, and just go back. Just like American government, ladies and gentlemen. Then how about take a look at the opposition team's word? We think beforehand going in, and we are realistic. We face the problem that we actually, there will be so much problems if we go in. So ladies and gentlemen, if you can choose the word you want to live in, where would you choose? I'm sure that you want to choose to live in the opposition team's word. Thank you.
Now the proposition reply speaker, please come to the podium.
May I begin? An aid invasion is something that you pursue only when all your other options have been exhausted. All our other options have been exhausted. And we, too, are exhausted. We are exhausted from watching millions and millions of people die for no reason except because their government has disintegrated. We are exhausted from watching failed state after failed state spiral into a vicious cycle of instability and violence. And we are exhausted from not being able to do anything to stop this. But we have a choice. First, we can continue our methods of direct aid, wasting countless resources and achieving nothing. Second, we can stand by and let people die and do nothing. But there's a third choice, and that is the best choice we have. That choice, our last option, is to conduct an aid invasion. An aid invasion, it has consequences. But what measure does not have consequences? But the consequence that this particular measure does not have is that it will not work, because it will work. We have shown you how it will work throughout this entire debate. Our house is a liberal democracy. We have the resources, and we have the means to help stabilize these countries and to help save millions of lives. An aid invasion is giving aid, except that you are making sure that that aid is going to the people. We will face costs. We will lose lives. But if we do, you will save an insurmountable number of lives in the long term, because people will not continue to die. It will stop. This isn't the best option ever. The best option would to have no conflict at all. But it's the best option we have. If we don't produce an option, we're losing lives. The opposition doesn't have a burden of proof. But if the opposition is going to contest the fact that this is the best and last option we have, then they have to show that there is a better option and there is another option. And apparently, according to them, the best option is to give direct aid. We have shown you that in a failed state, the government is so unstable and corrupt that this aid will do nothing. It will not help the people. An aid invasion will. There is no other option. But the problem is that we need an option. So we are using the final and best option of an aid invasion to save lives, to save a government's stability, and to save the world's future. Thank you.
We're about to announce the champions of this tournament, Team Acme and Team Infernal. Please stand up from your seats.
Now, drum roll. YTN 한국외국어대학교 주최 제1회 청소년 영어 토론대회 우승팀은 바로 고양외국어고등학교 Acme 팀입니다. 무대 위로 올라와 주시기 바랍니다.
Please congratulate Goyang Foreign Language High School Team Acme as they are the champions of the first YTN Hub's Youth English Debating Championship.
수상은 YTN 김사모 상무님께서 해주시겠습니다.
The award will be presented by YTN Director Kim Sa-ho. Certificate of Achievement, Champion,